There will be moments when someone does not confront you directly. They manipulate, they twist facts, they undermine you subtly in front of others. They smile while diminishing your credibility. This is not open conflict. It is strategic pressure. When someone plays dirty, it rarely looks dramatic. It appears casual. A remark disguised as humor. A doubt planted quietly. A public correction delivered with calculated timing. What feels like a personal attack is often something else entirely. Few men realize most battles are fought in perception, not confrontation. The moment you react emotionally, you step onto their terrain. Anger, visible frustration, defensive explanations, these become evidence. Not of your strength, but of your disturbance. Dirty tactics rely on predictable reactions. They provoke, then observe. If you respond impulsively, the hierarchy shifts. Control transfers. What could have been neutral becomes narrative. Psychological warfare is subtle. It tests composure more than intelligence. And the first rule is simple. If you react emotionally, you have already surrendered leverage. Power begins with recognizing the game before playing it. Dirty tactics succeed because they target something ancient and deeply wired. They do not attack logic first. They attack identity. A subtle insult, a dismissive tone, a strategic omission. These are designed to trigger emotional circuits before rational analysis begins. Emotional triggers are fast. Status anxiety activates almost instantly. The fear of being diminished in front of others, of losing respect, of appearing weak. These concerns are rooted in evolutionary hierarchies. Social standing once determined survival. Today, it determines reputation. The nervous system reacts as if the threat is physical. Social validation dependency intensifies the effect. When self-worth relies heavily on how others perceive you, any attempt to undermine that perception feels destabilizing. Manipulators sense this instinctively. They probe for insecurity. They test reactions. They observe what unsettles you. Cognitive blind spots add another layer. Few men are fully aware of their vulnerabilities. We all carry unresolved insecurities, areas where doubt still lingers. Jung described this hidden territory as the shadow. It contains the traits and fears we prefer not to acknowledge. When someone plays dirty, they often touch precisely this concealed terrain. The reactive ego defends immediately. It seeks to restore status through forceful correction or emotional display. The disciplined strategist does something different. He studies the trigger. He asks why the remark provoked intensity. He refuses to allow insecurity to dictate action. Dirty tactics work because they bypass conscious thought and exploit unexamined fears. Once those fears are understood, the tactic loses its grip. The difference lies not in intelligence, but in self-mastery. The temptation to fight emotionally feels justified. When someone undermines you, the urge to retaliate appears natural. But emotional retaliation rarely ends where it begins. It escalates. One sharp response invites another. Tone hardens. Positions become rigid. What started as a subtle maneuver transforms into an ongoing conflict. Each exchange tightens the cycle. Pride demands consistency. Neither side wants to appear weaker. In this spiral, clarity disappears. Reputation erodes quietly in the background. Observers are not evaluating who started it. They are evaluating composure. The man who reacts quickly becomes associated with volatility. Even if his arguments are valid, his delivery overshadows them. Emotional intensity dilutes credibility. There is also the internal cost. Emotional conflict consumes attention. The mind replays conversations, imagines future confrontations, rehearses better responses. Energy that could have been directed toward growth, strategy, or creation becomes trapped in defense. Over time, exhaustion sets in. Most importantly, fighting emotionally means fighting on the opponent's terms. Machiavelli warned against entering battles defined by your adversary. When you accept their provocation and respond impulsively, you surrender strategic ground. They dictate tempo. They choose terrain. The disciplined strategist refuses this trap. He understands that strength is not measured by intensity, but by positioning. Emotional reaction feels powerful in the moment. Long-term authority belongs to those who maintain frame. The cost of fighting emotionally is rarely immediate defeat. It is gradual diminishment, and few men notice it until influence has already shifted. Once you understand that dirty tactics are psychological maneuvers, the response must also be psychological. The first objective is not retaliation. It is control of the frame. Mental trick 1, the pause. When provoked, do nothing for a few seconds. Maintain steady eye contact. Breathe slowly. The pause interrupts the expected script. Most manipulators anticipate immediate reaction. Silence destabilizes them. Communicates that you are not reacting, you are evaluating. Few men realize how powerful this brief stillness can be. In that pause, authority repositions itself. Mental trick 2, frame reversal. Instead of defending yourself, redirect the attention. If someone undermines you publicly, respond with a calm question that exposes their intention. What specifically do you mean? Or, can you clarify that? This shifts pressure back to them. The burden of explanation reveals whether their remark had substance or was merely strategic provocation. Quiet questioning often dismantles weak tactics without aggression. Mental trick 3, strategic indifference. Not every challenge deserves engagement. Some tactics rely entirely on your reaction for oxygen. By showing measured indifference, neither offended nor amused, you deny reinforcement. Indifference is not apathy. It is selective attention. It communicates that your standards determine what matters. Contrast this with loud reaction. The reactive man defends, justifies, escalates. His urgency signals insecurity. The disciplined strategist repositions quietly. He understands that perception shifts faster than words. Composure becomes weaponized not through intensity, but through control. When you manage the frame, you manage the outcome. Once you control the frame, the next layer is detachment. Dirty tactics depend on emotional access. If someone can reliably predict your reaction, they can guide your behavior. Detachment interrupts that predictability. Mental trick 4, emotional containment. Containment does not mean suppression. It means absorbing the emotional surge without broadcasting it. The insult may land internally, but it does not spill outward. Your posture remains steady. Your tone remains even. When emotion is contained, observers see stability rather than disturbance. Stability signals hierarchy. Mental trick 5, selective response. Not every accusation requires correction. Not every jab requires defense. Select your responses deliberately. Speak only when doing so strengthens position. The selective man communicates discernment. He does not feel obligated to clarify every misunderstanding. That restraint creates psychological distance. Mental trick 6, calculated silence. Silence can be a strategic tool rather than passive absence. When you refuse to fill space with explanation, others are forced to interpret. They project assumptions. They question their own certainty. Silence creates tension. Tension shifts attention. Unpredictability destabilizes manipulators. If they cannot forecast your reaction, their strategy loses precision. If they cannot read you, they cannot control you. Detachment builds identity strength. You become less dependent on external validation and more anchored in internal stability. Over time, those who attempt to provoke you encounter resistance, not through aggression, but through composure. And composure erodes manipulation quietly. Pause and consider your own history. Have you ever escalated a situation when silence would have secured the advantage? Think carefully. In how many moments did your need to respond override your need to win? Ask yourself another question. When you argue, are you fighting for ego or for position? There is a difference. Ego demands immediate validation. Position concerns long-term authority. One seeks applause. The other seeks leverage. Who benefits when you lose control? Not you. Not your reputation. Often, it is the very person who provoked you. Emotional reaction transfers energy to them, confirms that their tactic worked. Few men are disciplined enough to master psychological conflict. It requires restraint in moments where pride demands action. It requires self-awareness when impulse insists on dominance. It requires patience when ego seeks closure. Conflict is not always about defeating the other person. Often it is about governing yourself. If your internal state is easily moved, your external position becomes unstable. Observe yourself honestly. Notice when pride surfaces. Notice when urgency replaces clarity. Sovereignty begins with recognition, and recognition begins with discipline. Immediate control is powerful, but lasting influence is built over time. The final layer of strategy shifts from momentary composure to long-term leverage. Mental trick 7, reputation shield. Consistent composure builds a protective layer around your presence. When you are known for steadiness, petty provocations lose traction. People calculate before testing those who rarely react. Over time, your restraint becomes deterrence. Authority compounds quietly. Mental trick 8, controlled countermove. When response is necessary, make it deliberate. Address the behavior, not the emotion. Correct calmly. Set boundaries clearly. A measured countermove carries more weight than heated retaliation. Precision demonstrates control. Control reinforces hierarchy. Mental trick 9, strategic withdrawal. Some battles are distractions. Withdrawal is not surrender. It is selection. If the environment rewards chaos, disengaging preserves energy and position. Power chooses terrain carefully. Victory requires favorable conditions. The reactive man fights every insult. He defends constantly, exhausting himself in minor skirmishes. The strategic man wins selectively. He evaluates which conflicts affect his trajectory and which merely feed ego. Long-term leverage demands patience. Influence grows not through constant confrontation, but through disciplined positioning. When you decide where and when to engage, you reclaim agency. Power is not loud. It is intentional, and intention determines outcome. All strategies converge on a single principle. If you control yourself, no one can control you. Every tactic discussed, pause, silence, detachment, reputation, depends on emotional discipline. Without it, techniques collapse under pressure. Self-control is not suppression. It is regulation. It is the capacity to experience emotion without being governed by it. Anger may arise. Pride may flare. But the disciplined mind decides whether expression serves purpose. Few men understand that mastery begins internally before it manifests externally. Machiavelli's realism was never about cruelty. It was about clarity. He observed that power belongs to those who understand human nature, including their own. A man unaware of his impulses is predictable. A predictable man is maneuverable. Emotional discipline disrupts that predictability. Self-control builds stability. Stability builds authority. Authority builds influence. The chain is simple but demanding. It requires repetition. It requires restraint when ego demands release. When you govern your internal state, manipulation loses traction. Insults lose urgency. Provocation loses its leverage. Your composure becomes your advantage. This is the ultimate weapon, not because it harms others, but because it fortifies you. Strength anchored in self-mastery does not require theatrics. It radiates through steadiness. Control yourself first. Everything else follows. Choosing not to understand psychological tactics does not make you virtuous. It makes you vulnerable. If you ignore how manipulation operates, you become predictable. And predictability invites exploitation. A naive man reacts as expected. He defends when challenged. He escalates when insulted. He exposes emotion when provoked. Over time, patterns emerge. Others learn where to press, what to say, how to unsettle him. Predictability transfers leverage outward. Reactivity follows predictability. When you respond impulsively, you surrender control of timing and tone. Authority erodes not in dramatic collapse, but through repeated small concessions. Each emotional outburst weakens perception. Each visible agitation lowers hierarchy. At a societal level, this pattern multiplies. Outrage culture thrives on impulsive men. Media cycles amplify reaction because reaction generates attention. Social platforms reward emotional volatility. The more easily people are provoked, the easier they are directed. Naivety does not preserve innocence. Preserves weakness. Power requires awareness. Awareness requires discipline. If you refuse to recognize the game, you will unknowingly play by its rules. The cost of staying naive is subtle at first. Over time, it compounds into diminished influence, and few men notice until authority has already slipped away. We return to the central truth. Dirty tactics only work against emotional men. Manipulation requires access. Provocation requires reaction. If neither is granted, the tactic collapses. The man who cannot be baited understands this. He recognizes when words are designed to provoke rather than clarify. He feels the surge of impulse, but he does not obey it. His composure is deliberate. His silence is chosen. In that restraint, power consolidates. He cannot be easily manipulated because his internal state is not dictated by external pressure. He cannot be easily destabilized because his identity does not hinge on public validation. He controls perception not by dominating conversations, but by mastering himself. Such a man does not respond to every challenge. He evaluates intention. He measures consequence. He chooses engagement strategically. His steadiness communicates hierarchy without spectacle. This is not coldness. It is discipline. It is the refusal to surrender leverage through impulse. Over time, this composure builds gravity. People test him less. They observe more carefully. They calculate before provoking. The next time someone plays dirty, observe before acting. Notice the instinct to retaliate. Notice the temptation to defend ego. Then decide consciously. Power is rarely loud. It is controlled. Beyond the struggle where discipline replaces impulse and clarity replaces chaos.